Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving deep into American English listening practice.
Oh, cool.
And to help guide us through this, we have Sarah, a seasoned English language expert.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Mike. I'm excited to sort of explore the intricacies of American culture and how that all ties into communication.
You know, when people think about American culture, the first thing that pops into their mind is its incredible diversity, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's this melting pot of just tons of different cultures and backgrounds.
Absolutely. And, that's what makes it so awesome and so lively for language learning. But also at the same time, it can be a little bit overwhelming. With all the different accents and dialects and slang, it can be a lot for someone who's new to American English.
Right. And it's crazy to think over 350 languages are spoken in the U.S. Obviously, Spanish is a major one, but there's just a huge range of languages from all over the world.
It really speaks to, the history of the U.S. as a global destination for immigrants. And it's not just the number of languages, but how they've all kind of blended and influenced American English over time. You hear it in the vocabulary and the grammar, the rhythm and intonation of different regional dialects.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that. I bet recognizing these subtle influences from different language families can be a real game changer for someone trying to improve their listening comprehension.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For example, if someone's familiar with Spanish, they might notice certain patterns in how a native Spanish speaker pronounces English words. And that can really help them understand what they're hearing.
So we've talked about the diversity of languages, but what about the values that kind of shape American culture? How do those values kind of come through in everyday communication?
Yeah, that's a great point. To really get American English, you got to look beyond just the words themselves and think about the cultural context. Values like freedom, equality, individualism, materialism, and the pursuit of happiness, these are really deep in the American mindset, and they influence the way people express themselves.
I can totally see how that plays out. The emphasis on individualism probably explains why Americans are so direct in their communication style. Right?
Exactly. And the value placed on, the pursuit of happiness could explain that American optimism, the can-do spirit, even when things are tough. It's almost like these values are just bubbling beneath the surface of every American conversation, even if they're not saying it outright.
And we can't forget that strong emphasis on hard work and education in American culture. These topics come up everywhere, whether you're watching the news, listening to something, or just talking to someone at a coffee shop.
For sure, the concept of the American dream, achieving success through hard work and determination, it's a strong cultural narrative here. And then you have these prestigious universities like Harvard or Stanford. They're seen as symbols of achievement and upward mobility. And you often hear them mentioned in conversations about careers, success, and even personal identity.
This is all so interesting. But can we maybe change gears for a second? Let's talk about something a bit more fun. Let's dive into American pop culture. You can't really imagine American culture without music, right? Jazz, rock and roll, hip-hop, pop country, these have had a massive impact globally. And they've definitely shaped how Americans use language.
Oh, 100%. American music is like a little snapshot of the country's diverse influences, and its impact on language is undeniable. Think about how often you hear expressions like feeling blue or hitting a high note. These are taken directly from music.
And then there's Hollywood. Blockbuster movies, hit TV shows, celebrity culture. It's all part of American culture. It has to influence slang and everyday expressions.
Absolutely. Hollywood plays a huge role in shaping how Americans talk, think, even dress. Movie quotes, catchphrases, they just slip into everyday conversation. And then you've got social media where celebrities and influencers are always coming up with new slang terms and trends that catch on super fast.
What about American cuisine? It's such a mix of flavors and traditions, from classic comfort food like burgers and hot dogs to regional specialties like Tex-Mex or Southern soul food. Food's such a window into a culture.
Right. Food is a big part of American culture, and it's a conversation starter. People love to talk about their favorite restaurants, argue about the best way to cook something, or just share a meal together. Just like with music, different regions have their own distinct food cultures and vocabulary. So if you hear someone talking about grits or gumbo or clam chowder, you can kind of guess where they might be from.
Okay, so we've covered music, movies, and food. But what about holidays? They're a big part of American life, and they give you insights into the country's values and traditions. We have Thanksgiving, Independence Day, Christmas, and even some uniquely American holidays like Memorial Day.
Totally, holidays are more than just days off in the U.S. They're times for families and communities to come together, celebrate shared values, and make memories. Each holiday comes with its own traditions, vocabulary, and topics of conversation. Understanding these can really deepen your understanding of American culture.
And what about everyday life in America? I imagine things like etiquette, social norms, even those unspoken communication cues can be tough for someone new to the culture, like respecting privacy tipping, appropriately waiting your turn in line. These are all super important in America.
You got it. Mastering these unspoken rules of American etiquette can make a huge difference in how smoothly you navigate social situations. It shows respect for the cultural norms of the country.
And finally, let's touch on those iconic American symbols like the U.S. flag, the Statue of Liberty, the bald eagle. They're more than just images. They represent deeper values and historical stories that are woven into American identity.
Absolutely. Understanding the symbolism behind these iconic images can give you a much deeper appreciation for American culture and the values it represents. They offer a glimpse into the country's history, its struggles, and its aspirations.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far, Sarah. It feels like we've just scratched the surface, though.
I agree. There's so much more to explore when it comes to American culture and how it affects the language.
Well, we've got more coming up, so stick with us. So, Sarah, we've talked about some of the broader aspects of American culture, but for our listeners, how can they really immerse themselves in this environment and improve their listening skills?
Yeah, I think the key is to actively engage with American culture, not just watch it from a distance. And there's so many fun and easy ways to do that. For starters, make American media your go-to. Movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, those are all great resources.
Yeah, I could see how that'd be helpful. But I'm guessing it's not just about watching right. It's about actively listening and trying to pick up on those nuances we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Don't just passively absorb the content. Engage with it. Pay attention to the dialogue, the accents, the slang, the humor. Pause, rewind, repeat. Take notes on new words or expressions you hear. The more you actively engage, the better you'll understand those American speech patterns.
How about music? We talked about how influential American music is worldwide. But how can people use it to improve their listening comprehension?
Music is so powerful for language learning because it combines rhythm, melody, and lyrics in a way that makes language memorable. Start by exploring different genres of American music. Find songs you enjoy, read along with the lyrics, and try to figure out the themes, emotions, and cultural references in the music. And don't be afraid to sing along. It's a great way to improve your pronunciation and rhythm.
I've heard that podcasts could be really good for English learners, too. What do you think about that?
Podcasts are amazing. You can find podcasts on almost anything, and they expose you to a ton of accents, speaking styles, and vocabulary. Plus, because podcasts are only audio, they force you to focus on your listening.
What about reading? I'm assuming that's also important for listening skills, even though it's not directly related to listening.
Oh, reading is super important for building vocabulary, improving grammar, and understanding sentence structure. But to connect reading to listening, try reading out loud. Pay attention to the rhythm, intonation, and pronunciation of the words. You can even record yourself and then listen back to see where you can improve.
So we've got movies, TV, music, podcasts, and reading. Any other strategies listeners can use to enhance their American English listening skills?
Well, nothing beats real-life conversation. If you know any native English speakers, whether it's through friends, colleagues, or language exchange partners, take advantage of those opportunities to practice.
What if someone doesn't have access to native English speakers in their everyday life? Are there any online resources they can look into?
Absolutely. There are so many platforms now where you can connect with native speakers for language exchange, join virtual conversation groups, or even take online tutoring sessions. It's all about finding chances to interact with real people and get comfortable with the natural flow of conversation.
It's important to remember that making mistakes is a normal part of learning, right?
100%. Don't let the fear of messing up hold you back. Actually embrace those mistakes. Every mistake is a chance to learn and grow.
That's a great mindset. It's easy to get discouraged when you're learning a new language, but remembering that mistakes are part of the journey can make a big difference.
Totally. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and don't be afraid to laugh at your mistakes along the way. Learning a language should be fun, not a chore.
Okay, so we've talked about cultural immersion and given a bunch of tips for improving listening skills. But before we wrap up, I want to talk about another big part of listening comprehension, and that's active listening.
Great point. Active listening is super important, especially when it comes to American English. It's not just about hearing the words. It's about really engaging with the speaker, paying attention to their verbal and nonverbal cues, and asking questions when you need to.
So it's not just about understanding the words themselves, but about understanding the meaning behind them, picking up on the nuances, and understanding the context.
Right. Active listening means paying close attention to the speaker's tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language. These nonverbal cues can tell you a lot about the speaker's emotions, intentions, and even their hidden message.
That makes sense. You can say the same sentence in so many different ways, and the meaning can totally change depending on your tone of voice or her facial expression.
Exactly. Active listening is all about picking up on those subtle layers of communication that go beyond the literal words being spoken.
So for our listeners who are working on improving their American English listening comprehension, what are some active listening techniques they can practice?
Here are a few tips. First, minimize distractions and focus on the speaker. Make eye contact and show them that you're fully engaged in the conversation. Second, pay attention to nonverbal cues like facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. These can often provide clue about the speaker's true meaning. Third, don't be afraid to ask questions if you're not sure about something. It shows that you're really listening and want to understand what they're saying. Fourth, try to summarize or rephrase what you've heard to make sure you got the main points. This helps you understand better and shows that you're actively listening. And finally, be patient. Active listening takes time and effort, so be kind to yourself and let the conversation happen naturally.
Those are great tips, Sarah. Active listening is definitely a skill that takes practice, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. Active listening is the foundation of good communication, and it's a skill that will help you in all parts of your life, both personally and professionally.
Well, Sarah, this has been a really insightful deep dive into American English listening practice. You've given our listeners so much valuable information and advice. I've learned a lot myself.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. I always enjoy sharing my love for language and culture.
And for our listeners out there, keep practicing, stay curious, and don't let those mistakes get you down. Remember, learning English is an adventure, and every step you take gets you closer to fluency.
And don't forget to have fun along the way.
Absolutely. Learning a language should be an enriching and enjoyable experience. So embrace the challenges, immerse yourselves in American culture, and keep your ears open for all the amazing sounds and expressions you'll come across.
And one last thing, Mike.
Of course, what's that?
If our listeners are enjoying this deep dive, we'd love for them to share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more episodes like this one.
That's right. We have so much more content coming, so hit that subscribe button and join our community of English learners from around the world.
See you in the next episode.
Happy listening. You know, we've talked about active listening as a key skill, but I think there's another piece to this listening comprehension puzzle we haven't really touched on yet, and that's critical thinking.
Oh, for sure. Critical thinking is so important for really understanding and evaluating what you hear, especially now when information's coming at us from all sides.
Yeah, it feels like we're constantly bombarded with messages from the news, social media advertising, even just casual conversations. How can we sort through all that and figure out what's actually worth paying attention to?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in. It's not just about absorbing information passively. It's about questioning what you hear, analyzing the source, looking at the evidence, and forming your own informed opinions.
So it's not about blindly believing everything we hear, but about digging deeper and thinking for ourselves.
Exactly. Critical thinking means asking questions like, who's giving me this information? What's their perspective or agenda? Do they have evidence? What are some other viewpoints I should think about?
That's so crucial, especially with news and current events. There's so much bias and misinformation out there.
Totally. It's so important to be smart about the information we consume. Don't just accept things at face value. Do your own research, double-check facts, and be careful of those sensational headlines or emotional language.
And I bet critical thinking is important, not just for understanding the news, but for everyday conversations too.
Absolutely. Critical thinking helps you understand those subtle cues we talked about, like tone of voice, body language, and implied meaning. It's about reading between the lines and getting what's not being said directly.
That makes a lot of sense. So for our listeners who want to improve their critical thinking skills, what are some practical things they can do starting today?
Let me think. First question, everything. Don't just take things for granted. Be a little skeptical and ask questions about the information you come across. Second, think about the source. Who's providing the information? What's their background and expertise? Are they credible and trustworthy? What might be motivating them or influencing their viewpoint? Third, look for evidence. Are there facts, statistics, research to support what they're saying? Is the evidence solid, and can you check it? Fourth, be aware of potential biases. We all have biases, whether we realize it or not. Try to spot any biases in the information you're taking in. Fifth, get different perspectives. Don't just rely on one source. Gather various viewpoints to get a broader understanding of the topic. And lastly, be open to changing your mind. Critical thinking involves being willing to shift your opinions when you see new evidence or hear different perspectives.
Those are really helpful tips. Critical thinking definitely takes practice, but it's so important for navigating our complicated world. especially when trying to understand other cultures and perspectives.
I totally agree. And the great thing is, the more you use critical thinking, the easier it gets. It's like a muscle that gets stronger the more you work it.
Well, Sarah, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into American English listening practice. We've covered so much today, from pronunciation and grammar to cultural communication and critical thinking. I'm sure our listeners are well prepared to handle any listening challenges they come across.
It was my pleasure, Mike. To our listeners, remember, learning a language is a journey. Stay curious, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to try new things and immerse yourselves in American culture.
And everyone, don't forget, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, share, and subscribe to the Learn in This Lab YouTube channel for more episodes like this.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Happy listening.